Recap: Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 421, Chapter Dragon Rearing. Sovereign bore them across the roaring waters of surging river, his immense form slicing through the currents before leaping beyond Secret Waters Pass and swimming deep into the boundless darkness of the great ruins. As he glided near Border Dragon City, the waters behind them suddenly churned violently. The river burst open as a flood dragon surged through the surface in a towering spray. "Your Majesty," dragon-rearing sovereign spoke, his voice echoing with solemn restraint. "I am bound by oath and cannot leave Surging River. The Pact of Earth Count shackles me to this river's course. If I were to depart from it, death would follow. You seek the distant Star Sea, but I cannot accompany you there." With those words, dragon-rearing sovereign turned and sank back into the depths of Surging River. "However, I can summon the Divine Flood Dragon King to escort you." The flood dragon that had surfaced was nearly indistinguishable from the river itself, its scales mirroring the water's hue. It was none other than the Divine Flood Dragon King. Its divine might was formidable, no less imposing than that of dragon-rearing sovereign. With this creature carrying Qin Mu and the others into the great ruins, the darkness that blanketed the land would retreat before its presence. Qin Mu guided Si Yunxiang and Yan Jingjing onto the back of the Divine Flood Dragon King. Hulinger leapt lightly onto his shoulders. The surrounding flood dragons cried out, "Maha Maha," as they scrambled joyfully onto the body of the Divine Flood Dragon King, behaving with intimate familiarity. The dragon Qilin also bounded onto its back, his posture respectful and obedient. The Divine Flood Dragon King rose into the sky in a sweeping arc and sped directly towards Star Sea. Qin Mu turned his head to look behind them, yet the figures on God-broken mountain range had already vanished from sight. Above them, the stars seemed to draw closer with astonishing speed. Suddenly, it was as though beacon fires had been lit upon the peaks of God-broken mountain range. Brilliant lights ignited along the mountains, dazzling and magnificent. They connected into a long, radiant chain, forming an extraordinary sight that adorned the silent night of the great ruins with breathtaking beauty. The Divine Flood Dragon King carried the group onward until they plunged into the vast abyss of Star Sea, where even the distant outline of God-broken mountain range could no longer be seen. "Why hasn't Patriarch arrived yet?" the dragon Qilin asked in confusion. "He should be arriving soon, right?" Si Yunxiang opened her mouth, yet no words came forth. Qin Mu spoke calmly. "The night of great ruins is filled with danger, so he may be delayed. Let us head to Sunwell first." The dragon Qilin nodded before asking again. "Then why did Sainta say he wouldn't be coming?" "The sky is dark, so naturally he cannot come. Fatty dragon, stop asking questions." Upon the towering peaks of God-broken mountain range, the furnace behind Mute burned with raging intensity. Blind's eyes shone like two brilliant stars, while Butcher's garments fluttered wildly in the wind as he gripped his knives tightly in both hands. Village Chief floated high in the air, his vital chi taking visible form, as though his lost arms and legs had been restored. Each of them stood tall upon the mountain peaks. Cripple and Old Ma stood side by side. Granny Sai, deaf, and Apothecary shared a single peak together. Old Tao Master, Old Rulai, Hermit Qing Yu, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and Yu Jiaoqing each occupied their own mountain peak. Tuxing Feng, Xuan Shengwu, King Yi, King Kun, and the five immortals of the demon race all possessed extraordinary strength, so each of them stood alone upon their own summits. The primordial spirits of every person present had manifested into shape, nearly solidifying into physical forms. Like ancient gods and demons standing behind them, these towering spirits waited in silence for the coming battle. Though the heavens were shrouded in darkness, 18 distant stars grew larger and larger as they sped closer at terrifying speed. Village Chief's aura erupted outward. From the peak beneath his feet, a stream of sword chi shot into the sky like a towering cliff, stretching between heaven and earth, blocking the path of those descending stars. "Sun on East Sea, 1,000 layers wave." Butcher shook his blades, and brilliant knife lights erupted like a blazing sun rising into the heavens. In that instant, thunderous sound waves spread outward with the momentum of an endless sea. Countless waves reflected the knife lights that burst from that radiant sun, illuminating the darkened sky. Truly, the greatest knife art beneath heaven. Heaven Knife lives up to his name. Old May's body suddenly expanded as a vertical eye appeared at the center of his brow. He resembled a towering giant with a green dragon coiling around his body. Behind his head, a colossal sun formed, while wind and thunder roared violently around him. Kuafu chasing the sun. Abba! Mute set his wooden chest upon the ground and raised his thumb toward Old Ma in approval. The chest sprang open as streams of silver pellets poured out and shifted endlessly. Venomous substances spilled from Apothecary's herb basket and spread in all directions like a surging flood. At that moment, spiders leapt forth and began weaving vast webs between the mountain peaks. They moved tirelessly through the air, weaving their deadly threads. Behind Granny Sea, the star image of the great overarching heavenly stars suddenly appeared. It then shrank rapidly, growing smaller and smaller until it landed quietly within her palm. Cripple, however, looked nervous. His gaze darted in every direction as though he might flee at any moment. Burn! Underground fire! Tuxing Feng burst into loud laughter. Beneath his feet, God-broken mountain range suddenly erupted like a massive volcano. When his hammer struck it, the volcano surged higher and higher, rising with unstoppable force. King Kun laughed heartily. 3-inch nail still burns with heroic spirit. Look at my water breaking the starry sky. Behind him, a monstrous wave rose into the sky, towering between heaven and earth like an immense ocean wall. King Kun, lend me your strength! Xuan Shengwu shouted with laughter as she revealed his true form. He plunged into the sea and transformed into a tortoiseshell ship ailing across the surface of the water that stood perpendicular to the land. King Yi extended one arm and gave a sudden remor. Feathers sprouted from her arm and merged together to form awing. The feathers scraped against one another with a sharp clanking sound as they formed the blade-like shape of a goosewing knife. The 5 immortals of the demon race also drew their weapons. Willow Immortal wielded a whip. White Immortal carried a ball of thread. Fox Immortal embraced her pipa, while Rat Immortal and Yellow Immortal each carried a gray and yellow sack. They're here, Butcher roared. They intend to break through by force. Everyone, act decisively. We must stop them here at all costs and prevent them from crossing God-broken mountain range. The streaks of starlight drew closer until they formed a single straight line. They resembled 18 blazing comets plunging toward the seawall erected by King Kun, intending to pierce through it in one devastating charge. Butcher's knife lights shifted and reflected across the sea's surface. In an instant, they rebounded and slashed toward the incoming stars. Clank! 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 A thunderous clang erupted as Butcher blocked the first star. Yet the second star struck immediately after, shattering sun on East Sea, thousand layers wave. Butcher grunted heavily as the impact blasted him into the depths of the sea. Borrowing King Kun's strength, he dispersed the force of the attack. As the second star plunged into the sea, it became entangled in spider webs that shot forth from the spiders racing across the mountains. The star crashed into the water's surface, bound by the webbing, and was dragged backward, unable to advance further. The third and fourth stars rushed forward and smashed violently into the sea. Yet the ocean's surface suddenly split apart, revealing a vast sea of blood behind it. Sword of Founding Emperor. Sea of Blood. The 2 stars could no longer halt their momentum. They could only brace themselves and attempt to break the incoming strike. Boom, boom. 2 violent explosions echoed through the heavens as a blood-drenched god and devil staggered out from the sea of blood, their shattered bodies screaming in agony. Yet their power was overwhelming. Even without their momentum, they remained a god and a devil. Working together, they shattered Village Chief's sword art. But what greeted them next was still a boundless sea of blood. Sword of Founding Emperor, Sea of Blood. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor flicked his sword, executing the same technique as Village Chief. Though it was the same sword art, its concept was vastly different. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor had comprehended this move after witnessing Def's painting of the sword god's back. That painting had become the inspiration for his own sword path. The god and devil were struck with terror, yet there was nowhere to retreat. They could only charge headlong into the sea of swordlight. Chi, 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 chai. Shrill tearing sounds rang out as divine blood sprayed through the air. Several divine bones tumbled across the battlefield. Other stars rushed forward and collided with the sword picture. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor coughed blood as the attack shattered his technique. Seeing that the remaining stars were about to cross God-broken mountain range, Rat Immortal flung open his sack and shook it violently. The sack expanded into something resembling a massive cavern, swallowing the stars inside. Rat Immortal hurriedly tightened the sack, preparing to deliver lethal blows to the gods and devils trapped within. Suddenly, the sack exploded violently, blasting Rat Immortal backward. Willow Immortal instantly flicked her arm forward, her boneless limbs sweeping Rat Immortal safely away. But the moment she caught him, a terrifying force surged from Rat Immortal's body. Willow Immortal's face twisted as her arm distorted like twisted dough. Willow Immortal flipped and tumbled wildly, rolling repeatedly to shake off the destructive energy. White Immortal immediately rushed forward. The needles from his plate pierced Willow Immortal and Rat Immortal, one after another, guiding the terrifying energy out of their bodies. Only then were their lives preserved. Pack! 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 Massive waves erupted across the sea as majestic figures stepped upon them, sending torrents of water spraying in all directions. Star Sovereign Qiao, Flower Sovereign, and Star Sovereign Yan stood at the forefront, forming a triangular formation. Meanwhile, the other 13 gods and devils moved independently behind them. The 16 gods and devils pressed down upon King Kun until his arms trembled violently. Struggling to maintain the seawall, he grunted repeatedly before his arms suddenly cracked and broke apart. The 16 gods and devils continued pressing downward. King Kun vomited blood and was forced to lower the sea. Mountain peaks burst through the water's surface, revealing everyone standing atop them as waves churned violently around their feet. The sea was not deep, only 300 yards in depth. Beneath the surface, the tortoiseshell ship that was Xuan Shengwu sailed upside down. The eyes of the flying serpent and black tortoise gleamed coldly as they stared at the inverted reflections of the gods and devils above, waiting patiently for an opportunity to strike. Village Chief looked towards Star Sovereign Qiao, Flower Sovereign, and Star Sovereign Yan. Star Sovereigns, you all understand the consequences of opening those treasures. Must you truly slaughter every person in Eternal Peace Empire? Star Sovereign Qiao remained expressionless. If blame must be placed, blame yourselves for not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. You angered high heavens and those who stand above us. Under such circumstances, we have no choice. Old Human Emperor, we are merely following orders. There is no room for negotiation? The Star Sovereign Qiao shook his head. Although I despise many of the people here, I do not hate the common people of this world. I do not wish to do this. But when Emperor Yanfeng destroyed Jade Sovereign with a cannon, all opportunity for negotiation vanished. Furthermore, the laws and paths themselves were altered, which... Xuan Shengwu used that moment to appear beneath Star Sovereign Qiao. In a flash, the flying serpent burst through the sea and coiled tightly around him. The black tortoise followed with a deadly strike intended to kill him instantly. Broke all hope of negotiation. Star Sovereign Qiao allowed the flying serpent to wrap around him while the black tortoise struck. Yet the moment he emerged from their attack, Flower Sovereign and Star Sovereign Yan stabbed a flower and a flute into his temples. Crushing his brain, the flying serpent hissed in fury and attempted to rescue him, but Star Sovereign Qiao's divine sword flashed out and sliced it into pieces. Only by wiping out all the commoners of this generation will those above feel secure. Xuan Shengwu, King Kun roared. The golden-horned lance in his hand shone brilliantly as he thrust it toward Star Sovereign Qiao. Tuxing Feng clenched his teeth and swung his horn-shaped hammer forward. Meanwhile, the gods standing behind Star Sovereign Qiao stepped forward to intercept them. At that moment, Blind, Mute, the 5 Immortals, and King Yi were forced to make their move as well. God-broken mountain range trembled violently and sank lower as countless divine arts pressed down upon it. Meanwhile, the waters of Star Sea grew brighter and brighter. Chains rattled loudly within its depths as a blazing sun slowly rose from the abyss of Star Sea, driving back the surrounding darkness. Translator, Ninetales. Editor, Dark Gem. The sun rose from the western horizon. Blazing sunlight and roaring flames surged swiftly along the massive chains and spread across the entirety of Sunship, driving back the suffocating darkness of the great ruins and illuminating the lands around it. Countless monsters lurking within the shadows shrieked and sizzled when struck by the fierce sunlight, trails of black smoke rising from their bodies as they retreated. In a nearby village, the abandoned people of the great ruins were rudely awakened from their sleep. With bewildered eyes, they stared toward the colossal sunship that strode across the earth like a towering mountain, its 12 pillar-like legs pounding against the land. The sunship passed beside the village, yet when the brilliant sunlight poured across the villagers' bodies, it brought no harm at all. Instead, warmth spread through them like gentle spring sunlight, while the monsters hidden in the darkness fled desperately for their lives. Ever since the founding emperor era had come to its end, such a sight had become extraordinarily rare. In those ancient days, when darkness descended upon the world, dozens of sunships would march westward across the great ruins, pushing back the darkness and bringing light to the scattered people. Yet, after the founding emperor era, the last surviving sunship gradually became battered and broken, and its sun was extinguished. Only the Sun Guardian and the Sun Herders remained, dragging along a black sun as they secretly protected the great ruins in silence. The former splendor of the vessel had long vanished from the world. But now, the sunship had revived once more, bearing an intensely blazing sun that pierced through the darkness. Wherever the great vessel traveled, light followed. Upon the sunship stood towering giants, bathed in golden brilliance. As the colossal vessel trembled continuously, they were steadily drawing closer to the god-broken mountain range. Sun Guardian, something seems to be moving ahead. On the deck of the sunship, the Sun Herd chief felt his heart tighten with anxiety when he sensed an enormous presence approaching from the distance. Without hesitation, he hurried to report the matter to Yan Jingjing, who was controlling the sunship. At that moment, Yan Jingjing possessed a majestic aura like that of a heavenly deity. Upon hearing his words, she turned her gaze into the depths of the darkness. She could sense a terrifying creature rapidly approaching. The newcomer was rushing from behind the sunship, and its speed was far greater than their own. The girl's eyes blazed like two incomparably thick pillars of light that tore through the darkness itself, revealing the truth hidden within. The fog split apart, and towering mountains and steep ridges appeared before her sight. Yan Jingjing was slightly stunned. Those incomparably tall mountains were formed entirely from countless white bones. When the divine light from her gaze shone upon them, the bones writhed and shrieked, twisting in fear as if trying to escape her sight. At the same time, the fog behind the mountain of white bones grew even denser. A vast sea of mist surged endlessly, within which stretched a continuous chain of mountains. Two of those mountains resembled immense gates, leading toward a hidden world. They were the gates of hell, leading into Fengdu. The speed at which Fengdu swept across the land was astonishing. In the blink of an eye, it caught up with the sunship. The fog rushed past the surroundings of the vessel, and everyone aboard suddenly felt that the laws of heaven and earth had shifted. The flesh and blood on their bodies vanished, leaving only skeletal forms behind. The mountains of white bones within the fog passed directly through the people, along with the ground and rivers. Even the sun that hung above the sunship dimmed, turning green and hazy. Yan Jingjing extended her hand, yet the laws of Fengdu did not alter her body in the slightest. Her power had already reached such a terrifying level that she no longer fell under the dominion of Fengdu. She realized that the Fengdu world did not truly possess physical substance. It existed upon a different plane from their own, and she could not touch anything within it. Then she saw Fengdu itself, the magnificent ghost city. Indomitable hell gods stood upon the city walls and towers as if preparing to confront a powerful enemy. Meanwhile, at the center of Fengdu, the cape of a devil god formed from darkness hung downward and spread outward in every direction. Its owner towered even higher and more imposing than the sunship itself. The figure passed straight through their bodies, yet Yan Jingjing could not see the person's face. She saw only two blazing red eyes burning within the darkness beneath the cape. Swoosh! The Fengdu world flashed past them in an instant, the fog continuing to surge forward before vanishing back into the darkness. The sun gradually regained its brightness, and the people aboard the ship looked down at themselves to find that their flesh and blood had returned. None of them understood what had just occurred. The fog of the Fengdu world is heading toward the God-broken mountain range. Yan Jingjing raised her head and looked toward the distant God-broken mountain range. That was where village chief and the others had remained behind to intercept the gods of high heavens, and the battle there had already grown extremely fierce. The mountains of the God-broken mountain range sometimes rose high into the sky and sometimes sank deep into the ground. Sword lights and blade lights tore through the heavens again and again, shaking the world. All kinds of voices rang out like the bellows of devils and the whispers of gods. Brother, who herds cows, rode the divine flood dragon king to borrow Moonship, but he said it is very far away from here and that he must bring the ship from Moonwell to Star Sea. He asked me to defend his elders for a moment. I wonder if he can return in time. What's that? Yan Jingjing hurried forward with all her strength, but suddenly she froze in astonishment. From the direction of the God-broken mountain range toward the great ruins, countless balls of ghostly will-o'-the-wisp surged forward. She had no idea where they had come from. Pleiades' sun-star hoops. Layers of raging flames transformed into rings of blazing star hoops as she turned her gaze toward the will-o'-the-wisps. Within the eerie flames, paper boats were actually floating out from the endless darkness. Lanterns hung at the bows of the ghostly boats, casting dim light into the void. Numerous paper men rode upon paper horses, galloping wildly into the fog. Upon the paper boats sat elders wearing tattered black robes. Beneath the glow of the lanterns, they steered the vessels into the fog. Within the mist, enormous shapes that resembled gods and devils could faintly be seen battling those elders aboard the boats. Ghostly light occasionally flashed between the two worlds. Yet, something strange occurred. The shockwaves from the battles of those worlds never reached this one. Those collisions never affected the great ruins and had no impact upon reality. Those are the messengers of death from the legends. Yan Jingjing felt shock surge through her heart. The messengers of death from Yudu had begun fighting against Fengdu? What exactly was happening? She had no time to ponder further. With thunderous rumbles, the sun ship continued forward, rushing straight toward the God-broken mountain range. It drew ever closer to the battle between Fengdu and Yudu. Meanwhile, the battlefield above belonged to Village Chief, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the gods of high heavens. That battle was also extremely fierce. Yet compared to the war between Fengdu and Yudu, it was still far inferior. Every participant in the battle above the mountains possessed terrifying power. They were all equivalent to gods and devils and wielded extraordinary abilities. Yet none of them realized that another battle of even greater scale and terror was unfolding directly beneath their feet. The sun ship sailed beneath the God-broken mountain range. But before it could draw close, Yan Jingjing suddenly felt an indescribable palpitation in her heart. Balls of will-o'-the-wisp drifted over from the darkness as paper boats surged toward the Fengdu world. Within them, every messenger of death appeared identical. They were cold and silent, examining everything with invisible faces. A layer of mist concealed their true appearances, and when someone looked at them, they would feel as though the figures possessed only the most ordinary faces. Countless paper boats shot forward like sharp arrows. Behind them, Yan Jingjing saw an incomparably terrifying sight. A pair of flaming bull's horns slowly rose from the darkness. They were unimaginably enormous. The horns were formed from fragments of land belonging to shattered worlds. Countless souls shrieked miserably as they struggled upon them, endlessly falling from the nine-bend horns. Earth count. Yan Jingjing's heart tightened with tension. She clearly understood that the battle between the two worlds was extraordinarily dangerous, yet the critical moment had arrived. With no other choice, she steeled her resolve and drove the sun ship forward toward the God-broken mountain range. Batu! See Batu! Deep rumblings echoed through the darkness, the strange sound seeming to be locked within that region. The powerful practitioners battling fiercely atop the mountain neither heard nor sensed anything unusual. All they could see was the sun ship approaching closer and closer. At that moment, the sun ship brushed past the Fengdu world. Yan Jingjing, standing upon the vessel, heard the cryptic language of Yudu, yet she could not understand the meaning behind those words. Within Fengdu, the garments of King Yama beneath the Cape of Darkness fluttered in the wind. The vast cloak swept across the entirety of Fengdu City, and beneath it, the gods standing along the walls appeared tiny. Within the sea of fog, paper men and paper horses battled fiercely against gods and devils. The elders rose to their feet and lifted their lanterns high. Light poured outward, and the skeletons rushing toward them collapsed in waves, dissolving into black smoke. King Yama slowly raised his hand, and in that instant, the entire Fengdu seemed to freeze. Everything became fixed in place, as though even time itself had stopped. King Yama lifted his hand again, and a divine sword appeared within his grasp, slashing toward the bull's horn of the other world. Wherever the black sword passed, space itself compressed into solid substance, and layers of space shattered apart. Yan Jingjing's scalp tingled with dread, yet she could not hesitate. She poured all of the sunship's power into rushing toward the god-broken mountain range. Half of the vessel had already entered the realms of Fengdu and Yudu, making it extraordinarily difficult for her to move forward. But suddenly, she broke free from the restraint of the two worlds and escaped. Yan Jingjing released a breath of relief and turned back to glance behind her once more. At that moment, she saw that Fengdu and Yudu, the two strange worlds, had vanished completely. The site of their battle had disappeared. Truly strange. On the god-broken mountain range, Village Chief and the others were battling the gods of high heavens. Those imposing gods possessed either 4 heads and 8 arms, or 3 heads and 6 arms, their entire bodies appearing as though they had been forged from gold. All kinds of treasures erupted with boundless power, shattering the heavens and tearing the earth apart. Everyone was locked in a fierce struggle, which was especially exhausting for the old sword god, who was covered in wounds. The chi and blood of all the warriors surged fiercely, rising into the heavens like crimson pillars of light that dyed half of the sky red. Bang! A gigantic figure crashed down from the sky and landed directly in front of the sunship. It was the primordial spirit of the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor that had been struck down. Even though he was the legendary saint said to appear only once every 500 years, he still found himself at a severe disadvantage before absolute power. The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor leapt back into the sky, and his sword light flooded the heavens. His sword techniques transformed endlessly as he slashed toward a god with a single eye. That god opened his eye, and boundless divine light burst forth, engulfing the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor completely. Clank, clank, clank. The sound of swords colliding rang out continuously as the sword light of the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor spiraled through the divine light of the eye. The blade pierced directly into the eye and burst out through the other side of the god's head. Yet in the next instant, the fist of the one-eyed god smashed violently into the body of the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. The blow crushed him and hurled him into a mountain peak, flattening it into rubble. The head of the one-eyed god split apart, and a massive eye bored outward from within. Another fist rose immediately afterward and smashed ruthlessly toward the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor once more. So sinister, the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor coughed up blood and lifted his head to face the incoming fist. The head of the one-eyed god twisted around unnaturally as it looked down upon him with disdain. However, I'm not bad either. The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said with a faint smile. First chapter of Sword World, Boundary. The one-eyed god froze in surprise for a moment. The sword light hidden within his head suddenly exploded.